Good afternoon. I'm going to do a very short stream again today because I have a meeting coming up today. And I was just reconfirming that meeting now. I just got a text to confirm that's happening. So I thought I'd just bring myself back to this conversation we've been having about this debate on Jaren's channel, this Debatism X he does. This was one from just under a week ago. It was last Thursday evening. He had Alan from, I think it's called Space Audits, and Shane, I believe it's Shane St. Pierre. They tried to defend Aether against relativity. It's quite apparent that they know a lot of the terminology involved. Alan far more so than Shane. There's been a bit of a talk in a couple of chat rooms about how little Shane offered to the conversation, but also Red's Rhetoric did a pretty cool takedown of Shane and his nonsense as well, which I mentioned I think in a previous stream. I'll just jump into it. I hope people will come by and watch, but I'll do the share thing here. I obviously don't know what I'm doing, of course, but I've been trying to do it. So I think they're picking up from yesterday's. If you look at my yesterday one, I did a quick little review of how muons work, and I might even back it up just a little bit. I think there's a way to do this where you precise seeking, yeah, they're showing this graphic here. So I'm gonna just back it up to when they bring up this graphic. Here, I think it's just, I don't want to go back too far. I've just gone back a couple of minutes. I'll start playing it here.
Because there is no other known explanation.
Yes, and when you address the creation and tracking it, right? That's where you're just asserting it.
I just addressed it to you.
That's why you're stop interrupting me. That's why you said, "Oh, I don't want to discuss that. We know they're up here, blah blah blah," right? But you don't even know why they're.
So this is just to be clear. This is this whole thing about muons, and we've come in sort of mid-argument, and this is where I dropped it. I actually just kind of backed it up about a minute and a half from where I'd clicked stop before. So these are the muons in my video yesterday. I took another Science Channel's video and did a couple of still shots, and I think I let them speak a couple of times, but basically just to say that's a great video to watch if you're a layperson like myself and you want to understand what's going on. And they are they are getting into this nonsense of we don't know exactly where that cosmic ray originated from, and therefore when that ray makes contact with our upper atmosphere and muons are produced and they fall down to the earth, they're not useful, because even though they're there and are actually measured and detected, and we know that they're there, and they're not just a hypothesis, they're a evidenced and verified hypothesis that we now have as part of our overall theoretical knowledge. They're they're refuting it based on that. So I'll let them keep talking here.
What's the cause of what they what produces them anyways?
Because we're not discussing the standard model.
Do me a favor. Can we, when the other guy's talking, let's mute up. That's kind of the point where I shouldn't be over talking each other. And I let it go for as long as I can, but just make sure that you are only talking when it's your turn. Okay, thank you. So go ahead. I'll let you, Alan. Go ahead, speak from now. If you guys can mute, that'd be great.
Thank you.
So if you have a problem, if you have a problem with something that he says, you don't agree, just remember it so that when it's your turn, you can point out that it was fallacious or a straw man, whatever you need to point out. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Just because you measure muons on the Earth doesn't mean they came from the upper atmosphere. They have a half-life of microseconds, right? Fractions of a second. You don't know where they were. You don't know where they originated at. To assert that it came from the atmosphere due to link contraction and time dilation it's just your assertion. Okay. Now, that's all I have to say on that. Now, go ahead and make your.
All right. So I'm gonna jump in just say one more thing. I don't know how well it shows up on the screen, but Witsit gets it. Our buddy Austin there, Austin Witsit, has posted in the chat, and I'm gonna read his chat. He paid $5 to Jaren for this. And he says, what is the source of the muons? What is the starting position? How can you invoke contraction of distance without specifying the initial source? And I just want to point out that despite not knowing the initial source of the cosmic ray, the specific one that gets there, cosmic rays do exist and do travel through space. They they specifically point out that it's approximately 10 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. We're measuring from 10 kilometers above the Earth. I just want to make that clear. I'm sure Lucas and Peter will do that, or Peter in particular is the one doing this. And Peter, I don't know how well it's legible. Peter's wearing white headphones and has on a dark shirt. And Lucas, who is Sea Lion Prime, is in also a dark top, but has a darker beard and no headphones on, or at least not big ones. So hopefully that'll help people see that.
For counterpoint to that,
Thank
and
you.
then we're gonna move on.
It's dependent, by the way.
Thank
Muons
you.
are the example of a time delay. That's why it's important.
They're
to know
not an
about it.
example of anything. So
Right,
let me address
experimental
a few
evidence
things.
of it.
Well,
Okay.
Shane,
Okay, go ahead.
let me address a few things. First of all, the reason why I'm refusing to discuss how muons are created is because today we're not discussing the standard model of particle physics. We're discussing general relativity. Second of all, the reason why we know where they come from is because we probe different places looking for muons. If we go too high up, they're not there. If we go to a certain altitude, there's a lot of them. If we go a little bit lower, there's fewer of them. And guess what? They're coming from above us. They're not.
So I'm just going to jump back in. There's Peter's making some excellent points here. And he I'm sure it's not really that legible on this graphic, because when I look at it on my screen, even when it's even when I'm looking at it pulled out on my screen, where their screen is my full screen when I'm going to operate the thing. And I suppose there's probably a better way to do this, but I'm operating the controls on the page that I'm sharing, because I don't see a way for me to do that on here. Now I also remember I can do this, so I can make it a little bigger. But what I'm going to point out is right here, I believe it's right here, somewhere around here, it actually says 10 kilometers. Now, I'm sure it's not just at 10 kilometers and at no other exact point, but they are showing the distance they're traveling. And that will come up as they go here. And it came up yesterday in what I shared.
Coming from random directions, they're shooting down at us. We measure lower, we measure at the ground. So unless you're postulating that muons are manifesting themselves magically in random locations, and there's no causal effect of them being produced somewhere and traveling in a given direction with a certain velocity, unless you postulate that there's some fluctuations of some mysterious field, is that the argument you're making? You would have to show that.
Yeah, that's my argument.
Okay, the default logical position is they show up, they travel in a direction, and they decay on their way down. And then there's a question, how come they're not decaying enough? And when you introduce the concept of rotating ether, my friend, then you get the answer to that. This is empirical evidence for the fact that there's time dilation and length contraction occurring due to velocity.
Okay, this is something. Oh, sorry. I'm getting a message from my wife too. I thought I was going to have two calls back to back because there was something to deal with for my son too. But apparently she's going to talk, and then I'll jump in later. This is important. What Peter said here is really, and he gets right to the point here. Despite the fact that they're wrong, and there is something being measured here. And the chat, because this is on Jaren's channel, a lot of the chat is probably pretty Flurf centric, which is fine. When I'm in chats in places where reality is discussed, a lot of times there's very few Flurfs. I think it's normal that people feel more comfortable amongst their own people and don't want to go into the quote unquote lion's den, as they say. But a lot of the one of the interesting things about the chat, and I'm just going to point this out, is that they're saying a lot of nonsense, and they're they're doing something, and Globers, quote unquote, do this too, where they throw in other things. So they're pointing to curvature, they're pointing to refraction, and they're also saying the particle physics. This one person named Zetetic, and I don't know that they're the same. Zetetic's a name I've seen used a few ways, including ones where it's multiple names linked together with that in there. So may not be the same person, but they say particle physics, stealing etheric events and reifying them. Well, I don't think that's what's going on here, but let's play it some more.
Relative velocity. And I won't even pick on the fact that you guys mentioned several times that it's one of the observers that's contracting, because that's hilarious.
All right, so we're actually going to touch on that specifically now. All right, so we're moving on from.
So hi to Jimmy the Tux, and to Tori. I appreciate you guys coming by and having a look. So yeah, they're gonna. I don't know if they're gonna switch topics completely here, but I'll let them keep going. I'm probably gonna wrap this up in about 25 minutes. Just give me a half an hour to get ready for my next meeting. And I kind of was late getting at stuff, but it's just been one of those days where I've mostly been goofing around. My son's also home, feeling a little bit sick. Nothing major, just a cold here. So I'll run this again and see where they get to.
Muons. My position was already stated before, so we're good to go. Now we're going to talk about relativity of simultaneity. Suppose you have a moving train car at a velocity v full of passengers, and there's a bomb at the center of the train car. Bomb is configured in such a way that it'll detonate when it receives a simultaneous lightning strike at the front and the back of the train car. With respect to the train car, there's a stationary observer on a platform. At the exact moment that the bomb-carrying train car intersects with the stationary observer, lightning strikes the front and back of the train with the stationary observer. Does the bomb detonate, or is there a temporal divergence due to link contraction and time dilation as a function of the square of the velocity of the train over c? And are the passengers saved? What say you, sir?
Well, I think we need to get a little bit closer on some of those definitions there, like, because we need to think about it. I think that.
So I don't remember if I've done this particular thought experiment. Hey, PC, welcome. Good to see Crystal. Crystal is a great supporter of my channel, and I don't know, Crystal, you can type in how many you think it is, but I think it's about 10,000 other channels, because I never go anywhere without running into Crystal. So either Crystal's a long game private eye who's been hired to follow me on the internet, or she's just amazing. So what I was going to, and also, I don't know if I've pointed out everybody that has great channels. I'm pretty sure Tori said she doesn't do content. Jimmy the Tux does do content, and PC does content, mostly shorts. And PC went through a major hurricane down in southern Louisiana, and yeah, that was wild. There's some great videos on there, so please check that all out. And Tori, if I'm wrong and I'm misremembering, please, you're a mod, so share what you do if you do something you want to share with anyone who's watching now or later. So I'm going to play this again, but they're trying to go from this muon thing. So I think this is Alan from Space Audits this year. He's saying, well, here's a thing that's unrelated to what you just said, other than it's also part of studying relativity. So when you study relativity, you'll talk about things that happen on a moving train is often used, so that you have a moving reference frame, and then there'll be a stationary reference frame in comparison with the train. So like on Earth, we would see someone on a train as being in a moving reference frame, and someone standing still at the train station, say, seeing the train coming, and they could see something happening on the train that they're in the stationary reference frame. Now you could also, and this is brought up often in relativity discussions, you could say, well, the people on the train are in the stationary reference frame, and the Earth and the tracks are moving underneath the train, and they're coming to meet the train, which is not how we usually ever think about things. But when you get something that isn't connected to railway tracks, connected to the ground, it becomes easier to sort of imagine two bodies that are moving around in the cosmos, that aren't on railway tracks, for instance. Although I'll make the argument that you could see it that way in terms of things that move, that they're on a path that doesn't change until something makes it change. So that's a different conversation. And I don't want to muddy the waters with that type of thing, but they're muddying the waters. What Alan is bringing up here, what he's trying to do is muddy the waters with this thought experiment to help people understand relativity. And I don't know which way this one's going because I've looked at a few. And I don't want to get deep in the weeds on this, just to say that what you end up usually finding out is that the event happens in some thought experiments. The event actually happens, but what what they're getting at here is one where it maybe looks to, and this is one of the freaky things about relativity, is that it could look like, for instance, to an outside observer in one reference frame, that the train's on a collision course for, and I think what they're getting at, there's a bomb on the train. The bomb will not go off unless there's some sort of ignition source for it, and they're talking about lightning bolts. So I'm going to jump ahead for this because I'm not going to let them take us into the weeds. But basically, what the thought experiment shows you is that it could be that it looks to you in your reference frame like the train is on a direct collision course for that, and it looks like it meets the point where they'd meet. That they are actually going to meet at the exact same time, but yet in the reference frame of the actual train and the lightning bolt, they don't actually converge, and they just miss getting hit. That's what a lot of these experiments sort of deal with, something like that. Some of them will involve astronauts being hit by like a ray gun or something like that. Different people use different ones, I think, just to differentiate or to show that it doesn't matter what the things are. If you're just saying, well, these two events happen simultaneously, it could look in one reference frame like they do, but in fact they don't. But that's one of the sort of things about relativity that makes it seem magical and hard to understand. But when you start looking at space-time diagrams, you can see where things happen, and the things happen in a space of time. And there's also thought experiments where you can see, there is a time at which it cannot happen before, cannot happen after, but there is a time during which the over a certain area of space, it is possible to view that thing happening. And then there's a time at which it can no longer be seen. And that's derived through a lot of math and stuff like that. But the diagram itself, the space-time diagram, which I think they're showing a version of here, is being brought up. And I think what they're basically saying is it isn't relativity, it's Aether. So we'll let Alan explain that. But I just wanted to sort of put in perspective that a lot of this has to do with things that take a few minutes to go through. And they're not immediately apparent. And debating them like this is a bad way to do it, because I've seen Brian Greene take like 20 minutes to explain these types of concepts to university students. So let's go.
The distinction is going to be whether there's a relative frame or an absolute frame, correct? Do you agree that if we assume a relative frame with a constant speed of light, then it would follow that simultaneity is relative?
What was your question?
If we assume a constant speed of light in all reference frames and the principle of relativity within those frames, it would be the case that simultaneity would have to occur in relative fashion. So my question to you is, doesn't your understanding of this example for us hinge on whether or not there exists an absolute lab frame on Earth, and where would it exist relative to that moving train?
Would the bomb detonate? Yes or no?
Well, I think we need to define the terms a little bit better.
Answer the question.
So if
Define the term. Define.
Okay, so thanks, PC. Thank you so much. Hey, Sumami, bow chicka bow bow. Yeah, that's the theme song for walking into the apartment complex with a fake plumber's outfit on, right? That's great. I'm not a very good singer, and my voice is feeling a little messed up today, but I don't think I can do it justice. But I do feel like 70s porn soundtrack should be going in the background. Great to see you, Sumami. In fact, I think that sort of soundtrack music was used like all the time in shows like Simon and Simon and stuff like that. Anyway, I do not want to get completely off track here. I need another sip of coffee. And I do have to make sure I wrap this up soon enough to get ready. So you can hear Alan saying, well, just answer the question. Does it blow up or not? He threw this out there, just read it out and said, which is it? And Lucas, who is Sea Lion, is saying, well, hold on a second. Is there or is there not an absolute reference frame? And in relativity, the answer is no. But we pick one to do our math. We say, okay, this is the frame we're working from. Because if you try to do the math with everything moving and nothing being a stationary point relative to other things, it's tough to do. But you can pick any two things and say, okay, this one's moving or that one's moving. And that's how you see time dilation, length contraction when you do this. I don't think they've made a really good argument as to throw this out, because what they're doing is they're trying to trip them up, and instead of tripping them up, they're getting this answer that they don't like, which is, let's be clear on what's being asked here. They want to get them to say yes it blows up the train, or no it doesn't, when they don't know, because you could actually ask this question in multiple different ways and get different answers. So I'm going to call this bullshit. It's a bullshit response to what they've brought up on relativity. It's a bullshit way to tear relativity down, because you have to be precise. When you're doing this math, you do it precisely. And in fact, I remember going through these and I keep on shilling for the Brilliant app. Sometimes you do it and you see, okay, these two events do happen simultaneously. And yes, there is this result where someone gets hit by something. And then in another one, it's like, no, they just missed it. And it's because the math is different, because the numbers are different. Because in one situation, the two things meet. In the other situation, they don't. And for that reason, this is not fair. But they're trying to make it look like they're unwilling to have this conversation.
Find the terms and answer the question. They're your terms to define. You're the relativist.
That's what we're trying to do. So our position is in accordance with relativity, right? So
what does relativity say?
I have the answer on the screen, if I may, Sea Lion. What is shown here, and there's a GIF, so bear with me because it's animated, but that's a good thing. From a position, let's say A and B denote three independent events, three bombs exploding. From the point of view of a stationary observer, V0, all three happen at the same time. You can see it right now. All of them are happening at the same time. An observer who's moving with a speed 0.3 sees, wait for it, C occur first, then B, then A. And this observer, the opposite. This is what
your argument is that the train would not blow up due to the velocity of the train.
I couldn't follow your description because you were speaking so fast that you lost me after the first two sentences.
Do it again.
Do you have a picture? Can you?
Okay, so this particular diagram was great, and Peter quite rightly pointed this out, because this diagram puts it in really great terms, and it's really easy to see. And this animation it's tough, like he says, because he can't manipulate the animation, but he can manipulate it by waiting for time to go by, which is something Flurfs hate. And it's created this great argument online. So quite rightly, so in the stationary reference frame, where you're just, this is all moving towards you or you're moving towards it, it doesn't matter whether, like, you're the white line. When you're moving to it and the horizontal white line is parallel to the A, B, and C, they happen simultaneously. But when you skew it because your speed changes, these velocities change, then you see them in different reference frames, and that's what relativity is all about. I'm going to let them play a little bit more, and Peter quite rightly points out they toss this thing out in a couple of seconds and expect it to be totally understood immediately. This is a terrible way to argue for Aether, which I'm also going to point out they haven't fucking done once. But anyway, let's see what they do now.
Can you provide some kind of picture that you can walk us through
The
step
point
by
is,
step, like the way I walked you through the muon measurement?
Go to Google and type relativity train
No,
car.
I'm not going to Google. I
Okay.
want you to walk us through it.
Got you.
the point is, no amount of relativity makes that bomb not explode. That's the correct answer.
Yeah, that's
As
the
you can
correct
see,
answer, really.
all three events occur. We're not saying
No matter where
the
you're looking at
occurrence
it
of an
from,
event
it
is
goes
relative.
boom, Peter. No matter where you're looking at it from, doesn't matter.
That
no
is
matter
true.
where you're.
That is true.
Okay, so then there is an absolute frame.
No,
Ta-da.
all events occur. The three independent events, A, B, and C, occur in all frames of reference.
Then there's an absolute lab frame then.
No, clearly there isn't. The coordinates for the moving observer are rotated through the ether.
So your argument is that that the bomb wouldn't detonate because of the velocity of the train.
Again, you have to walk me through your
that's your
thought
position.
experiment step by step, because your speech was incorrect.
Okay, this is nonsense, and hilariously, people are saying Alan brought it. He said, "Well, you could go Google this," and I'm like, just so that people understand, this particular diagram is not Alan Shane's diagram, even though it mentions Aether. We have to remember, and I want to remind people what what Peter and Lucas are doing is saying Aether cosmology, and that theory that was tossed out after testing and finding out that hypothesis wasn't correct led us to relativity over time. And so they're using this term in some ways to taunt their opponents, and also to taunt Flurfs in general, the ones that subscribe to this. This is Aether cosmology is like Flurf 106 or something. It's definitely not Flurf 101. It's by the time you're arguing for this sort of is esoteric the right word? I'm not sure. But this is stuff that was tested, found to be wrong. We moved on, and Alan and Shane went back and found these old documents and said, nope. In the 19th century, all of science had come to a head. We knew everything we needed to know, and all the science and technology that's been developed since then is fake. But unfortunately for them, they're wrong. And I don't know why they showed up on a computer, because theoretically, I'd like to see them do this entire thing by telegram. But even then, they'd be getting in their own way. All right, I'm going to, I got 10 more minutes I think I can put into this. Hopefully people are okay with that. I'll let them keep going. Despite the Flurfs moaning and groaning in the side chat, Peter and Lucas are doing a great job at at shooting this down and pointing out why this is nonsense.
So
Yeah.
incomprehensible to me.
Okay. Well, you can go back and listen to it then on the playback. Here we're going to
Okay,
read
I shall
from
do
the
that.
here we're going to read back from the definition of simultaneity here, where he says, and then down at the bottom, we shall not here discuss the inexactitude which lurks within the concept of simultaneity for two events at approximately the same location, which can only be removed by abstraction, which is what you're doing right now, because we all know the train would blow up, and which implies that there's an absolute frame for them all to be relative to. And the hypothesis of the ether theory is that all events will occur simultaneously in the ether. Guess where the ether is at? In the lab frame on Earth. Now, for the next part, you were saying.
Hold up a second.
Lincoln,
Let's pull it out a little bit.
what's
So
up?
you say that the
No.
this within an
No.
absolute frame
But
on Earth?
before we move on, both of you
But
guys.
that's important because you just
both
slipped
of you
that in
guys-
there. We need to.
before we
That's a
move
very
on,
important point, though. We need to
stop.
address that.
Okay, just write it
Before we
down.
move
Remember
on-
that. Go ahead.
Before we move on, both of you guys agree that the train blows up in all frames and the velocity of the train will not save anyone.
I don't, because I couldn't follow your experiment, your description of the thought experiment. You were speaking too fast.
Okay, how about Sea Lion
See-
Prime?
See,
I
Lion,
concur with Peter.
you concur with
My
Peter?
God.
Oh, all right.
In case anybody wondered, I concur with Peter. Hey, Commander, good to see you in here. And thanks for coming by here. I'm spending a few minutes going through this before I start my appointment. And I have 5 minutes left. So we'll see if they get to a new topic. I don't know why it isn't obvious to people that this isn't the same. The simultaneous thing, simultaneity is not the same in relativity. And a lot of the arguments about this, like lab reference frame, a lab frame, a stationary frame, a preferred frame, all that sort of stuff, a lot of that was brought up when they were discussing relativity. So I'll see how this goes. And I'll do a few more minutes of this and then get ready for my meeting.
All right, bro, we're going to run it one last time.
Yeah,
Walk us through it. Can you show us a picture? It's very hard to visualize these things purely based on speech.
Well, keep trying to stare at your picture and just think real hard that it won't explode. That's what you could.
Yeah.
Well, that wouldn't be intellectually honest on my account.
It'll be perfectly honest.
Can you stop that share for me, Peter? Thanks.
Suppose you have a moving train car at some velocity full of passengers and there's a bomb at the center of the train car. The bomb is configured in such a way that it detonates if it receives simultaneous lightning strikes at the front and back, similar to the the standard example that they give for the moving train car and the stationary observer at the center. Right? With respect to the train, there's a stationary observer on a platform. At the exact moment the bomb carrying train intersects with the stationary observer, lightning strikes the front and back of the train car. Okay? Does the bomb detonate, or is there a temporal divergence due to the velocity of the train?
Yes, I am familiar with that. It's a common what you call it, puzzle in relativity, and the solution is well known. I don't remember it.
That's a real shame. Sea Lion, you.
So what would this apply? So let's think about this for a second, because
This is
It's
a perfect
impossible to
example.
solve it. It's impossible.
So this question really comes down to what's the train experiencing? And this is a loaded question. And Peter's about to explain why this is taking us in a stupid direction for this conversation, because tripping someone up on the details of this puzzle would not undo relativity. It would show that by not walking someone through all the details and giving them a few minutes to work it out, that you're proving that this person can't follow bad instructions. And if that's what Alan and Shane want to prove, they've proved that they're extremely bad teachers and that they are incompetent, but they have not disproven relativity. And more importantly, they've brought up zero to back up Aether. They have not provided an experiment to test for Aether and gives a positive result. They have not given us an experiment to test for Aether and gives a null result, that leads us to further experimentation that then has a positive result for Aether. What they have done is looked at a bunch of things that back up relativity and said, nah, followed directly by, and that is really unfortunate. Peter and Lucas are doing a good job here, but this is one of those situations where Peter and Lucas look like to people that think Alan and Shane are brilliant. Makes it look like they're being dishonest or dodging, which is what they're saying in the chat, and that is not true. They are trying to they're trying to be honest to a fault, and that's what often happens is that the smart people want to take a step back and get it right, and the stupid people try to use that honesty against them. And smart people don't make knee-jerk reactions to things like this. And you could study relativity and memorize this thought experiment, but you could present the thought experiment with different parameters, and it would have the opposite result. So Peter's refusal to just say, yeah, here it is well founded. I'm gonna go back to playing it again I'm gonna go a couple more minutes here.
To solve it this way, you have to draw geometrically all the relationships, and it's actually given to students in universities to solve this particular conundrum. There's a very well-known solution. This is a debate tactic to throw at you something that it's complex, that has to be drawn and calculated using angles and lengths, and now it's presented in a verbal form, and it's impossible to explain it correctly unless you just did it on a piece of paper and just are reading off your notes. So this is a trap.
Didn't we make up the train bomb example, dude?
It's a basic question, and it even says here in Einstein's 1905 paper, we shall not here to discuss the inexactitude that lurks with the concept of simultaneity for two events at approximately the same place, which can only be removed by abstraction. Right?
So it's hard to think about these things because they're counterintuitive.
No, you guys all agreed that at one point that the bomb would go off, and then you stopped when you realized the implication of an absolute frame.
In special relativity.
And then now you're appealing to an equation that doesn't exist. And I'm not even going to pick on you and tell you to. And I'm not even going to pick on you and tell you to pull it up and show me right now. So I don't give a shit. I know.
Yeah, this is, and he's also he's reading a quote, I think, from Einstein. The context of the quote isn't clear because of the way he reads it and where he reads it. And Einstein has written in both papers and in books about relativity, both general and special relativity. And I think it's important to remember that Florfs love quote mining almost as much as young Earth creationists, which many Florfs and Yeks are one and the same people, but not universally so. So I'll let this go for a couple more minutes, see if we can get through this topic at least, and then I'll try to do some more of this later because I'm gonna have to come off of this and get to work here.
I know the bomb blows up and
they're spiraling. So in special relativity, there's no such thing as violation of causality, and there's no such thing as events occurring or not occurring depending on the observer. This is very well known, and all the paradoxes in relativity that are given as thought experiments for people to calculate and compute, that is done every day in every university on Earth, have a known solution within the special relativity.
What's the solution for the muon paradox?
Gotcha. Okay.
I just provided it to you.
Yeah, we just talked about it. So
let me ask you this: Would you board the train then? Would you be on the bomb train and you take the risk? No.
No, not without having first thought through the thought experiment. I would sit down for a few hours. I would think through the thought experiment. I would employ the services of a person who's familiar with these problems to help with my poor knowledge of geometry, and I would then answer your question.
Let
Cool.
me,
Sea
let me
Lion,
ask
would you get
about
on
the
the train?
implications. Let me ask you about the implications of that question, though, because you mentioned
The
there's
implications
two
are you
things that
die.
are
Would you get on the
no, no,
train
no,
or not?
there's two things that are related to that question that get back to this idea of the absolute frame. So thus far in the debate, we have not established a constructive difference between a theory of the ether and a theory of the relativity on the basis of what we established of our definition of ether. The only thing that will distinguish them on the basis of what we've talked about so far is the existence of an absolute frame. Now, there's two components that we need to talk about with relation to this supposed absolute frame. The first one is we've identified that unless you have another piece of evidence you want to discuss, your only piece of evidence for a one-way speed of light calculated within this absolute frame of reference was from GPS, which by itself would require calculations. And
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it up there. They've already had a bunch of these conversations. They're in the chat. They're just laughing, and they think this is a big win against relativity. I got to agree with Peter. Peter said, "I'd want to work this out," and probably because Peter realizes that you can ask these questions and have different results. Anybody that's been to school probably realizes that sometimes when you do questions to check things out, you'll actually do multiple problems and see different results, or see what happens if you change one of the variables, to see whether would this happen or would this not. I know some of the chemistry questions that I've been doing on Brilliant, for instance, will ask you multiple questions and they'll say, is there enough of this initial chemical? If you have 1 gram of this and 9 grams of that, is there, and there's no catalyst, can you put these two things together and at this temperature and and expect a reaction? And you work through that problem, and when you do the math, you're like, no, there's not enough energy present at that temperature for any of these things to leave where they're at. You can mix them together at that temperature. There's just not enough energy for anything to happen. And then you can say, well, if you add a catalyst at 20 degrees Celsius, you can. But if you don't add a catalyst, you need to be at 90 degrees Celsius, and then there's a reaction, all that sort of thing. And you work through the problem in multiple ways. And the reason why they're pointing that out is because sometimes this is what happens, and sometimes it isn't, and specifics matter. And so, much like this particular bomb will only go off if there's a lightning strike at the front and the back of the train at the exact same time. And so the question may be, if it happens in one reference frame, is it possible for it to not happen in other reference frames? And I believe the answer comes down to the situation of, does it happen to the train, whether or not an observer standing in a different reference frame observes it to happen in that order or not, or an observer moving at a different speed sees it happening that way, but it doesn't actually happen. And so that's why the math has to be done carefully. Hey, Joe, good to see you. So unfortunately, I'm wrapping this up right now, but I'm glad to see you, Joe. Joe, we would have loved having you on here, and I didn't plan this out very well. My son's been not well, so he's been home with me today, and I've just been chilling out, not feeling that good this morning. And I had to come down and do a meeting. I was like, well, I'll jump on and do a little bit of this. So I've done this for 45 minutes almost, and I think that's what I promised myself I wouldn't do more than. Well, I'm at 44 minutes. So welcome, Joe. Great to see you. Joe, it was good to see you too on were you on Mark Reed's channel a couple of nights ago? I'm pretty sure that's right. I was watching some of that. I didn't catch it all. My attention span and my ability to stay awake have been really bad. In the last couple of nights, I have or last 2 days in a row, I've had an afternoon nap, and today I'm not having that. But I slept in this morning a little bit, and I did a lot of chilling out this morning. So yeah, no, Joe and Mark Reed had a great conversation. I highly recommend both of their channels as well. And thanks, Crystal, for getting on that. So while I'm saying goodbye to this, it looks like we've made it 2/3 of the way, maybe through this, because I think they do this where they have a few sort of more casual things at the end where they read some super chats and throw out some questions. And I know Jaron does not interrupt the debate for this. The other thing is they each have a half hour left of time to have this debate. Or 27 and let me look at it here. 27 and 22 minutes. So there's about, let's say, 45 minutes. Hey, Victoria, thank you for being here. And Victoria has been lurking, but often has great things to share. And always appreciate having Victoria here. And I think I saw Victoria. I don't want to dox Victoria and say where she's hanging out, but there was some sort of a flirt conversation going on last night. I think it was last night, and I dropped in on that too for a short time. There's been a lot of nonsense going on because of the what do you call that fucking experiment? The final experiment, the one Will Duffy's doing. So everyone's been talking about that. MC Toon did a show where he was in a Discord chat with a bunch of people. I think even Witsit was there, whinging and whining as he usually does. Yeah, MC Toon, yeah, okay. Oh, did I do a super chat? Yes, I did. I did a super chat. Well, I was in my member super chat, but yes, I sent one out. I wasn't kind. Crystal's gonna remind me to be kind. I did my essay, which I think Crystal's helped me share a number of times, and I'll keep sharing. And I hope people will read it and take it to heart. And learn to be kind, especially to people that they maybe weren't kind to before. I'm trying to be kind to flirts. I guess calling them flirts isn't exactly kind, but I mean, what do you call them? What's a word? They don't live in a different reality. They just think in a different one. Yeah, Victoria, I'm gonna post this up here. Yeah, I feel bad for laughing, but do anyway. My wife, my wife has given me shit about it. She's like, you're making fun of people with mental disabilities, and I'm like, I mean, I think the ones I tear the crap out of are mostly the ones that are making money off of it. The ones I don't usually talk to individuals in any way that's unkind if they just misunderstand or have beliefs that are literally religious in nature, and they're just having them. It's the ones that are really toxic and the ones that are grifting and lying and the ones that know that what they're saying is wrong. I don't think it's a disability either. PC, my wife doesn't know about how it works and stuff, so she's just like, you're making fun of these people. It is cognitive dissonance is definitely a big piece of it. I think my wife is not knowing what's going on. She just hears me talk about what these people believe. She's like, well, obviously these people don't have a full deck, and I get how that's her take on it. She's just assuming they don't know what's going on. I'm running way over time here, so I don't want to take too much time away from my volunteer work to spend on this. But sometimes doing some thinking about something else helps you apply your thinking to what you're working on, and I do find that helps. They shun accurate information. Well put. They do shun accurate information, and they shun their own members when they figure out what's true. They've been super mean to Rachie 50s and other people that have left. And I can't think of all their names. And I probably messed them up anyway because I'm bad with names. But Rachie 50s I remember in particular because I remember when she was talking to people over on Slim's channel. She was coming over and being fairly friendly and chatting with people and being reasonable. And I'd seen her have arguments and chats and arguments online where she was actually in debates and stuff where she was quite a reasonably minded person with wrong information and wrong conclusions, but she was a reasonable person, and those people tend to come out okay. So I guess I'll remove this. I'll say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for dropping in, and I'll try to hit this again. And if I have more heads up or how I'm feeling, I'll try to plan it out better. But thank you, everyone.